Fans rely on sportscasters to tell the stories and highlights of their favorite teams. But getting into that seat at the sports desk is not easy. A new book by former ESPN anchor Scott Reiss shares a glimpse into the paths of 15 national TV sports personalities, including one of our own here at King 5.
You got some amazing tidbits from these sportscasters, what they learned in the business. Some of these experiences are crazy, right?
They are. And, part of it, I think, is the crazy experiences, things that these people had to cover during their formative years in TV, right? It's not just the big time stuff.
Yep.
Part of it is the hoops that we all had to jump through. And certainly, and anybody who's worked in the business understands, you don't just become a national TV personality overnight, and you don't do it by accident, right? There's a lot of grind. You got to move through small markets. You got to be willing to sacrifice a lot.
Well, do you have any stories you want to share? Just a little tidbit?
I don't mind giving away some of those tidbits. Which sportscaster did an entire sportscast with an IV in his arm one time? Which sportscaster helped launch Shaquille O'Neal's rap career? And the sportscaster was not in Los Angeles or any big city doing this. It was middle of nowhere town. And yet somehow they had this random happenstance. Sportscaster that helped expose an illegal prostitution ring in Las Vegas, right? This is not generally in it's not in the brochure when you sign on for these gigs. Yeah. And yet, some of the things, and the other crazy stuff is the number of folks. I mean, these are big time, unmitigated success stories at the national level. The number of folks who were fired from jobs along the way, said, nope, sorry, go away. We don't want you. The number of people who had to do some of these crazy other non-TV related gigs just to make ends meet so that they could put themselves in a position to someday maybe even get on television, let alone make it to, ESPN or someplace big. So it's pretty cool.
Seattle's own Kenny Mayne, he shared a story like you mentioned. What did he have to say?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, anybody who is familiar with Kenny Mayne knows that there is nobody remotely like Kenny Mayne. I mean this on air and off air. He is, first of all, nicest guy in the world, but he's just such a unique personality. So his chapter was one that when he gave it to me, I actually sat up and I looked around. I said, oh my God, this is gold. This is absolute gold. And Kenny's story is a little different because unlike many of us who toiled in, tiny towns and small markets, sort of working our way up, Kenny was in Vegas, which is a decent sized market. Then he was in Seattle, obviously a major market, and then right to ESPN. And even when Kenny finally had his ESPN interview, it was not days or weeks or months. It was years before he actually finally got there. So his is a great story too, but it's different. Not surprisingly, if you know Kenny, than everybody else's.
I love it. So King 5's own Steve Bunin earned a spot in your book. We're going to talk to Steve in a second, but first, give us a little bit of a hint.
He must have been in like 72 different small cities, right, before he got his big break, right? And then he gets to ESPN, and now he's obviously parlayed that into the great gig he has, there with you guys in Seattle. But I'll tell you something about Steve, and I'm sure people up there, they probably know it if they're paying attention, but maybe the viewers don't all realize the extent to which we write our own stuff. Steve is as good a writer as you're going to find. That translates in the book. I mean, his stories are great, but they're even better because of the way he tells them.
Okay, well, now we're joined by King 5 news anchor Steve Bunin, featured in the book. Hi there, Steve.
I'm blushing. That was so nice of Scott to say all those nice things about me.
Yeah, but you know what? Not surprised. Not surprised at all. We know that here. Well, look, you spent time at ESPN, transitioned to news. Why the change?
Well, so I was there for about 9 years, and I loved sports, and I always have growing up here. I was also always interested, I think a little more than the average sportscaster, about everything else in pop culture. I was a political science minor in college, so I was always interested in the news of the day as well. And after sort of a great run for me at ESPN, I moved to a sports job in Houston, and then that didn't work out. I didn't get that story in the book, but it just became a good transition for me to be able to now tell a bigger piece of the puzzle, I guess.
Well, we're glad you're here. Now we want to get to the details, some hints from the book. So apparently your story, blood was shed.
Yes.
So that's a real story. You were at a small station in Michigan. So what's the deal?
Yeah, I don't mind saying he was the story he referred to, the sportscaster who did a sportscast with an IV needle in his arm. So basically I had this medical problem in my leg. I went to the hospital after our 6 o'clock news. There's no other sports guy in this tiny station. They give me an IV for what's going on with this blood problem, circulation problem in my leg. And they say, in 8 hours, we're going to give you another hit of the medicine, and until then, you're kind of free to go. Now, this is before cell phones, so I'm going to stare at the wall for 8 hours. I said, can I go back to the station? I'll do the 11 o'clock news and then come back at 2 a.m. And they were like, yeah, but we're not taking the IV needle out of your arm. We're just not going to poke you again. So I said, okay. So they took out the tube, but I still had the IV needle in my arm capped off. I go back to the station, and we did it kind of like this, where we framed me and they just cut me off about here so a viewer couldn't see it because I have this IV needle. And I not only do the sportscast, a year later, again, spoiler alert, the same news director is the news anchor at that time. He's the guy who's kind of bantering with me like you and I are doing. He was the boss. And a year later, he basically fires me and literally says to me, I never felt like you bled for the station. And I know he meant it I know how he meant it, but that was even more insulting. But
yeah.
So I said, Joe, I literally bled for the station, and you know it. So that just encapsulated some of my issues getting started in this career that ended up taking me to ESPN.
Gosh, where is that guy now who did that?
I know where he is, and a lot of people know where he is, and we'll just leave it out there. Karma's very interesting, but honestly, once I got that my dream gig, which was ESPN when I was a little kid here in Seattle, it all sort of fell by the wayside. It was like it's just part of my journey, and I wouldn't be who I am now if it wasn't for what happened then.
All right, taking the high road. Good, go ahead, Oprah. All right, Scott's book, it really highlights just the slog that sportscasters have to go through to kind of get where they want to be. So, I mean, you lived that experience. How do you describe it for those who don't know?
Hard. I tell that to a lot of kids, high schoolers, college kids who are looking for advice, and I say, it just, like Scott was saying, it doesn't just happen. You don't just get to ESPN. A lot of it is luck, but it's a huge pyramid of the number of people who love sports and then want to talk about sports and want to be a sportscaster, and then actually will take a job for $13,000 a year, 3,000 miles across the country, sight unseen, or then something like this happens where you have a needle in your arm, you end up getting fired basically from the job. Do you really want to stick with it? And so for me, I did. I kind of had blinders on, and I think that helped a lot of the people that you read about in this book, that we all dealt with our own struggles, and it's hard. But if you love it and you're willing to do it for $10,000 a year or $100,000 a year or anything in between, then that can help lead you down your path.
And your big break, did someone just see your tape or was it a meeting?
Yeah, so then I was unemployed after that whole thing for a year and a half, living back home here in Seattle doing odd jobs. Then I get one more job in Kalamazoo, Michigan. My agent sends my tape to the talent guys at ESPN. They brought me in for an interview. They liked what they had seen. So a year and a half after all that mess, I ended up at the worldwide leader in sports.
Well, I think we're just going to leave it right there. So many fascinating stories in this book, yours among them. And now more people know that you're a wonderful writer as well.
Thank you very much. I'm really honored to be a part of this book. There's a lot of super famous people in here, and I'm really, really humbled to be a part of it.
Awesome. All right, I'll see you around, Steve.